Are you a high-performing parent, entrepreneur, or high achiever in pursuit of excellence? Welcome to The Nexus Podcast, a podcast custom tailored for families like ours, driven, affluent, and eager to lead extraordinary lives. From rockstar stay-at-home moms to high-producing CEOs, we choose to model success for everyone we are surrounded by. We prioritize health over sickness, embrace a vitalistic lifestyle, and seek to tap into the limitless potential that God has bestowed upon us. I'm Dr. Daniel Kimbley, your host, and on this podcast, we'll uncover the secrets to living a fulfilling and abundant life, where you and your loved ones can thrive physically, mentally, and spiritually. Together, we'll forge a path to greatness and unleash your God-given capabilities. Get ready to say yes to a life of true prosperity and well-being. This is The Nexus Podcast. Hey, what's up, fam? Welcome back to another episode of the podcast. And this week on the podcast, I want to talk about success. I want to talk about skills. I want to talk about something that happened to me when I was at one of my daughter's swim lessons a few weeks ago. And I really debated in my heart of like, should I share this episode? Because I know it's probably going to step on some toes. But the point is never to be offensive. It's just to get people to think about the decisions and actions that they make. Because ultimately, what this podcast is all about is uplifting the community. If you guys know, you've listened to other episodes of the podcast, Nexus literally means connecting people back to the life that they deserve, connecting people to other people. And a big part of brain development and what we do is allowing the brain to be more connected to its environment. And I'm not going to go necessarily into like all the details of how that works and how the brain gets connected to its environment, but I want to share an observation with you that I saw a few weeks ago at Coco's swim lesson. And then I want to round that up with this conversation of brain development and what it means for people to be successful, specifically kids. And so this is what went down, is I'm at Coco's swim lessons like I normally am, and usually I'm doing a little bit of work, but paying attention to her. Most of the work that I do is off my phone, full disclosure, and I'm very mindful of the work that I do on my phone. There's a red light blocker on the screen. There's a lot of things that I do to mitigate the stress that being on a cell phone in general creates. So neither here nor there. What happened is there's a mom who has one of her kids in the swim lesson, and their other older kiddo is on an iPad and they're watching Bluey. And now, like I have a million different thoughts about iPads and about watching screen and all these things, but what really came up for me is like the fact that I'm sitting there trying to just enjoy this moment of watching my daughter crush it in swim lesson. She actually got to level up that week, which was super cool. And she was so proud of herself because she's been working so hard. But this mom like literally has her daughter completely oblivious or not paying attention to her daughter at all. And her daughter's blaring Bluey on the iPad. And now there's a big part of me that's like so frustrated. I think it is insanely disrespectful when people listen to their stuff out loud. It doesn't matter if it's at the beach or if it's in public or if you're on speakerphone. Like, to me personally, I think it's rude. And the reason I think it's rude is because I think it's a lack of respect for the people that are around you, and like not understanding that probably not everybody wants to hear your conversation or your Bluey episode or whatever it is. It's very obnoxious. And so again, that's me being judgmental. That's me not being necessarily so loving, but I'm going to be raw with you, is like that's just where I stand on it, and it's an observation and it's how I feel about it. Now we can get into a conversation though why I think it's critical that like as we think about our kids and as we think about what we do or allow or what we don't allow with our kiddos, this becomes an important conversation, not just about Bluey and blasting the iPad or listening to your cell phone out loud, but it really becomes a conversation of success. And the reason that it becomes a conversation of success is because as I'm sitting there hearing Bluey blaring in my ear next to me, I can't help but think about how this kid is literally being taught to be completely in disregard for her environment and the people that are surrounding her. Like, mom is like, just focus on this Bluey episode. Don't pay attention to anybody around you. It doesn't matter what anybody else thinks or how obnoxious it is. Just be focused on yourself, wrapped up in your own world, and completely disregard everybody else around you. And I think this is really teaching a lesson, and we see this play out over and over with like how many people feel super entitled in society. I could go on a million different examples of people just because they went to college, they feel like they deserve XYZ amount of pay. Or people who just because they went to college deserve a job. Or just because, even my daughter in certain instances, she's like, well, daddy, I took out the trash. It's like, no, that's just expected. Oh, daddy, I made my room. No, that's just expected. You don't get a reward for those things. And so this idea of success comes up, right? And the conversation of success looks like this, is that part of allowing someone to be successful is being able to connect with other people. I think there are very few occupations. I think there are very few professions. I think there are very few places in general where people can actually not be connected and work with other human beings. And what we know about the iPad and about the blue light that comes from the iPad and about the EMFs that come from the iPad is that those things all actually create a stress response in our bodies, and they decrease our ability to connect with other people. Those stress hormones turn off the frontal cortex of the brain. And so as we're teaching our kiddos completely subliminally to disregard the environment around them and just be focused in the episode so it's more convenient for everybody else, including the parent, I think that what we're actually doing is teaching people to be more disconnected. And when we're more disconnected, it actually makes our brain function less. We need healthy human interaction. This is why a brand newborn baby likes skin-to-skin contact so much, is because it boosts oxytocin. It actually helps brain development. And so if we're putting a kiddo in front of a pad and they're not looking up and they're not interacting with their environment, we're literally de-stimulating the part of their brain that is responsible for success. That part of the brain is the prefrontal cortex, which is responsible for our emotional intelligence, for our connection to other people. So if we are de-stimulating it just because it's comfortable and it's easy, like what we're literally doing is creating a less successful generation of kids. And this is where it gets really interesting, is that not only are we doing this from a stress perspective with the hormones, but there is something called a symmetric tonic neck reflex. And what that symmetric tonic neck reflex simply states is that when a baby or a kid learns to start to crawl, when their arms go into extension, their neck goes into extension. And so if you think about what we do when we put a kiddo on an iPad, we reverse that reflex. That's supposed to be this signals development of the front part of the brain. And so we're literally putting our body, we're literally putting our kids into a less developmental state that is negatively affecting the front part of the brain. The part of the brain that is responsible for grit. The part of the brain that is responsible for directing attention. The part of the brain that is responsible for controlling our behavioral outbursts and emotions. The part of the brain that is responsible for connecting to other people. The part of the brain that is responsible for faith, for hope, for optimism. The part of the brain that is responsible for creativity. The part of the brain that is responsible for every single skill that would make us a successful human being. We are literally stunting when we put our kids in these environments. Yes, from a very physical perspective, but also from a stress perspective in the way the blue light and the EMFs negatively affect the front part of the brain. But then we're also training them. So we have this threefold stacking of stress on the system that is teaching our kids to be less connected. And when we're less connected, we know that there's less success. Like literally every single study I've ever seen says that indicators of longevity, indicators of happiness come down to connection to other people. But if we are disconnecting ourselves by putting our kids in front of iPads, in front of cell phones all day long because it's convenient for the parents, we're letting the iPad parent the kids. And I'm not saying this to call anyone out or say that it's negative, but from a brain perspective, all of the older people who complain about the younger generations, at some point, somebody had to raise that younger generation. And this is what I think is so interesting, is when I see that these parents can't control their kids because they have so much behavioral issue, and then they put them in front of a screen, and then they wonder why they still have a behavioral issue. It's we're just feeding the fire. And so my encouragement for you would just be to think about this. It's wherever you stand on the iPads, maybe you think I'm completely crazy. Maybe you think I'm a wrong parent, or maybe you think I'm full of it, or whatever the case may be. It doesn't necessarily matter, because what I know is how the brain develops. What I know is a very intricate set of neurology that actually allows us to be successful human beings, and all the research supports this. This isn't just me making it up. This is what the research says. This is what the science says. This is basic biology. And so my encouragement would be is just to think about what decisions are we making on a day-to-day basis? Because if you're not aware of the decisions you're making, there's no way that you could ever possibly change them. And I think this is such a crucial conversation, because when we walk into places and we see that someone can't make eye contact, or they can't speak well, or they're nervous or they're shy, and you're I wonder, is this person even going to greet me when I walk into the store? A big part of it is because they have been trained into this pathway for so long, it's nearly impossible to get out of unless we turn off the stress response in the system, which is what we do in our office chiropractically. Most people think this is about neck pain, back pain, headaches, but what chiropractic care is actually about is about success. It's about waking up the front part of the brain so someone can express their life full out, so they can be more successful, so they can be more happy, so they can be more responsible, so they can live a life worth living, instead of just being alive and having a heartbeat, actually thriving and living out passion and purpose. This is what I'm about. This is what I get excited about. This is why I'm bringing you the episode. It's not to call anybody out, but my encouragement would be to say to you, where are you creating awareness or not with your kiddos? Where are you paying attention to where the next generation and how they are being raised? Because what I know is that if we can create a new generation of kiddos that are more connected, like, this world will literally transform in front of our eyes. So my friends, I love you. I appreciate you. Hope you got some value out of it. And I will always come at you again next week. Peace.